Keep watching The Politics every Friday.
Parole TV, the voice for humanity.
Hello, I am Dustin Pickering. Welcome to the Foreign Policy Review with me and Carlo Parcelli today. Our focus today will be on climate change and the U.S. military's actions to combat climate change. There seems to be a kind of bias in some circles that it's a hoax or some such, and we want to kind of go into what our actual institutions are doing in order to sort of alleviate some of those confusions about climate change and the fact that our own U.S. military is taking this seriously and trying to do some things should give us an indication that this is definitely a problem that we need to address collectively. So, Carlo, tell us a little bit about, you wanted to open up with some other discussion first off before we get started on that. So let's hear what you have to say on, I believe you were talking a little bit earlier about some things in Africa that you wanted to discuss a little bit. So go ahead and open with that.
Okay, yeah. First, I would like to congratulate the Sandinistas for their magnificent victory in the presidential elections, and I congratulate President Daniel Ortega once again. They're doing a fine job under amazingly stressful circumstances. The same with the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela. I congratulate the Bolivarian Revolution for taking 20 of 23 states in that country in local elections. Literally hundreds of, I think thousands of local elections. They did. It was a landslide under conditions that fat Americans could not imagine. With Uncle Slimy standing on their neck the whole time. Congratulations. The Sahel region, sub-Saharan Africa. It was interesting. We've done several shows which have touched upon current African politics in relationship to the United States. And the major one, for some reason or another, we couldn't upload. But I was left with a lot of information for that show. Left over, and one of the situations involved the coups that have taken over Africa. Well, it's actually been 5 of them since Biden became president, and those coups occurred in Guinea, Mali, Niger, Chad, and Sudan. And I began thinking about that geographically. If you look at where those countries are, all 5 of them are involved in what's called the Sahel of Africa. That is the sub-Saharan section of Africa. If you begin on the west coast, there was a coup in Guinea. Then you move a little bit farther east, and you have Mali. You move farther east of that, you have Niger. Then you have Chad, and then you have Sudan. And the other thing that's very easy to discover is the United States, that is AFRICOM, which is the show which we could not upload. It was devoted to AFRICOM, and the Central Intelligence Agency have been involved in all 5 coups. What a surprise! For example, in Guinea, the coup was led by Mamadi Doumbouya, who has long time ties with AFRICOM. As a matter of fact, he had just taken part in an AFRICOM exercise 2 weeks before he launched his coup. The only country of the 5 I mentioned that it technically wasn't a coup would be Chad, where their president Idris Deby, who actually went into combat. And this is what was released by the government of Chad, and was killed in combat with a rebel group from in the north of Chad called FACT, and it's an anachronism for I can't recall offhand, but it's called FACT. Well, FACT has a long time relations with a man named Khalifa Haftar, who's a Libyan, and that he was at one time a a supporter, actually a Confederate of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. But they broke with him and started taking CIA money uh, and um, and launched several attempted coups against Gaddafi, and eventually fled to the United States. And he lived near me in Vienna, Virginia. I live in Maryland, on the other diametrically on the other side of the Beltway. But he lived in Northern Virginia, not too far from where I live, taking U.S. government money the whole time. There's a real patriot for you. And he has strong ties to FACT, to that northern group. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much common knowledge that that the CIA and Haftar are backing FACT against Chad. So you have, if you take these 5 countries in the Rahel is made up of, in part, of 13 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. If you take these 5 countries, they form a belt, ironically, right across Africa. One country borders another. Guinea, Mali, Niger, Chad, and Sudan. Boom, 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 boom. Of course, Sudan, we know that the CIA and AFRICOM just launched a coup in Sudan. So there's some big stakes at play here. Now, why would the United States be interested in this region? Well, the major reason is to throw a monkey wrench into Chinese encroachments. Now, Chinese encroachments, they're not military. The U.S. is more involved in military. They've got some minor projects going on, but the Chinese, they're dead set on building infrastructure, and they've got several huge infrastructure projects already in process among these 5 countries. I won't go into detail with them, but they're readily, you can read about them readily on the internet. And so and as we well know, the United States is always interested in resources. So that's an obvious place you want to look. So what are the resources in the Sahel that may interest the United States? Well, first of all, you see that there's oil. That's, OIL. That's how you spell it. It's oil. There's always oil, and there's gold. Now, you'll also note that that 4 of the 5 countries are former French colonies. Now, and France is deeply involved in these new coup governments there, and destabilizing and kicking out the Chinese. Well, why is that? Well, 75% of France's power generation is from nuclear, so they need the uranium in that region, and they've been mining it for years. They have their international companies that have enormous contracts with the French government, with France, the French economy in general, to provide uranium for these nuclear reactors, because, like I said, 75% of France is powered nuclear wise. So those are 3 of the resources, and if that's not enough, there's a 4th, and this is a resource for the 21st century, and that's water. Water. Let me read you one little statement here. The Sahel sits atop some of the largest aquifers on the continent, the whole African continent, which is enormous. Recent research estimates that the volume of continental groundwater storage is in the order of 0.66 million kilometers cubed, which is approximately 100 times the volume of annual renewable freshwater resources on the continent. It's an enormous amount of water. I think when the Nestle people the Nestle company people got that information, that fact sheet back, they must have wet their pants, because there's right in the heart of Africa, you have these huge aquifers that you can turn into soda pop, that you can turn into to Coca-Cola and orange soda and whatever people want to drink, starting in Africa, which is a huge market for sugared drinks, corn syrup drinks. So I think water is the fourth element involved. And so you have this situation where right-wing think tanks in the United States are asked. This is from CSIS. It's the what is it? It's Gene Kirkpatrick's old think tank. I don't know what the anachronism stands for. I can't remember. But one of their articles asks, looking for clues as to how the new U.S. government will approach China's engagement in Africa. And it came out in January of this year, the new government being the Biden government. Well, we have our answer. Coups. What else? Fucking U.S. isn't going to build a highway. It's not going to build 9 hospitals like the Chinese are doing, I believe, in Chad. They're going to coup everybody. They're going to destabilize everybody and make the resources available to the corporations that require them and need them. The U.S. It just never occurs to them. It's what's first in their mind is just, we'll just murder people, we'll just starve them, we'll just sanction them. All these other things. The sanctions, like the new sanctions they're leveling against Ethiopia, as they arm the Tigray rebels to retake that country after they were imposed upon the Ethiopian people some decades ago by the United States. So anyway, that was I thought that was an interesting little discovery. If you just take a map and put up a map of Africa, you will find an amazingly clear path, a swatch, just like somebody burned it right across the Sahel. It's amazing, and it's something anybody with any interest in what Uncle Slimy is up to should pay attention to. So that leads us to our major topic. Mm-hmm. What we want to talk about, the U.S. military and climate change. And this one sticks in my craw because I have a bone to pick with every asshole on Breitbart that I had to talk to about climate change. Now, Breitbart is the Steve Bannon run. I don't know if he's still running it or not, but he was associated with it, and Breitbart founded it, and he passed away. And he was a major liar and asshole, and Bannon is a major liar and asshole. But anyway, they had everybody, and they convinced people by hammering away that climate change was a hoax. As a matter of fact, there was on this group, libertarians and communists this morning, there were 2 guys that were citing examples of climate change being a hoax. Oh, and the first guy, very fascinating. He said, he's talking about subsidies to oil companies. He says, if that's all the subsidies you make, you give to the oil companies, that's nothing compared to the amount of money they take in. So your immediate thought is, well, if they're taking in all this money, why do they need the fucking subsidies? This is the shallowness that you engage all the time among these anti-climate change people. But one of the things that galled me the most was when I mentioned that the U.S. military took climate change very seriously and had been for a long time. I was called a lot of names. I don't mind being called names. I'm called names all the time, but I can always back up what I'm talking about. So they would call me these names, and I would just go to the defense, Military Times or the Defense Journal or whatever it's called. And it's actually exactly the same texts repeated because it's really not. They say it's independent, but it's not independent. It's actually It's actually published by the military. So I would take their articles from the military involving climate change. And currently, there's 97, count them, 97 articles in the Military Times about climate change and what they're doing to ameliorate it. I want to go back just for a second and refer back to something else I have up here. I pulled up this little thing that talks about water stress by country in the year 2040. These are the three major countries that will face water stress in 2040, among others. There's obvious places: Australia, the Middle East, North Africa, South Africa, the east coast of South America. But the three major land masses that will face water shortages in 2040, according to this study, which was done by the World Economic Forum, which keeps asking me to form a symposium for their group. The United States, water shortage 2040, China, and Russia. So there's the three big ones, all facing the worst, the red, extremely high water shortages of 87% or greater, according to the World Economic Forum. So that would support my argument about the Sahel, but it would also support my argument about the U.S. military and its interest in climate change. But look at the military. Look at the U.S. military. What is the greatest signal polluter of the world today? It's the U.S. military. So you have a fait accompli. They're the greatest polluter. Of course, they have an interest in climate change because they're the ones that are causing it. So to hear these idiots on Breitbart call me names without doing a lick of work, now without reading one fucking article, all they do is listen to that fat, sloppy prick Bannon and his cohorts at Breitbart, and those dumb fucks spread their lies, their James Inhofe lies of snowballs in February in Washington, or whatever shit he did, and these other shitheads, Louis Gohmert, and people with the IQ of a snake sphincter. So the fact that the Military Times has spent enormous amounts of time dealing, and the military itself has spent enormous amounts of time and money dealing with climate change, is something that needs to be explored. If you want to interject something at this point, Dustin, I could take a breath if you have anything.
What are some of the actual and the investments from the military? What sort of I guess you could call them solutions or proposals they have in order to push forward in an effort to combat climate change?
Yeah, let me see if I can pull up. Let's see.
And do they have anything they suggest for the general population of, for the United States, the people of the United States? If they have any proposals that individuals can do, to limit, to sort of, combat climate change on a scale, individually? Do they have anything like, oh, can you, maybe change your diet in this way, or, move towards this kind of electricity or the energy consumption or anything like that? Or, what sort of propositions do they have that will be a positive step in the direction of combating climate change?
Well, the answer to your second question is no. What they're dealing with is just too enormous a set of problems. I mean, there's some interesting stats available around this. Let's see.
The other thing is resource accumulation, right?
Well, let me I could just begin with this. There's several dimensions to it. First of all, there you have the Arctic region, which is a major concern, because if the Arctic shelf melts, then Russia will immediately gain new routes for trade. It'll cut their trade time to places like Northern Europe and across the globe enormously. That's one of their major concerns. There are figures like forest fires in the United States, because the National Guard ends up fighting a lot of these forest fires. Well, as I think it was Elizabeth Warren, who's the only one that's proposed some kind of comprehensive plan for dealing with this through the military. She calls it the greening of the military. Whether those generals are going to buy this or not is another. They're not. it's another story. But anyway, she has a stat, and I've seen it elsewhere, that I think it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago. It would be 14 personnel days for the 14,000 personnel days for the National Guard fighting fires in the West. And now it's 176,000 days for personnel days. 176,000 National Guard personnel days for fighting forest fires in the West. Another figure I've seen is for the 3 major hurricane. I'm trying to find the actual stuff on that. For the 3 major hurricanes that destroyed, actually 3 major military bases that were destroyed by the hurricanes in recent years. The price tag for repairing just those 3 bases was $8 billion. $8 billion. So we all know where the U.S. military is famous for its waste. I mean, from the outsourced programs in Iraq, where Halliburton and Kellogg Brown and Root had all of these contracts to build all this wonderful infrastructure that the U.S. had just destroyed in Iraq. They never built it. They just walked away with the money. That's infamous. Even the U.S. military did an audit of itself, and over the last 20 years, they concluded that $21 trillion could not be accounted for. So the corruption in the U.S. military is enormous. So how any real progress can be made is beyond me. But just to read from somebody who has a stake in the game. His name is General Austin. He just happens to be the defense secretary. I think he's a general. He just happens to be the Secretary of Defense right now. And this is what he had to say just last month in a overall a kind of blanket report on climate change. This is for my climate deniers out there. How unpatriotic you are. What traitors you are to the U.S. because the U.S. military is your most revered. It's your most revered institution. Yet here, you're not even willing to grant them. It's this existential question they're wrestling with. You say that they're wrong. When you say I'm wrong about climate change, you're saying the military is wrong. Your most sacred institution is wrong in a fundamental way. That's what you're saying. So you're the traitors, not me. Not me. I'm in line with patriotism because I'm in line with what the U.S. military says and agrees upon. This is right from the mouth of the head of the Department of Defense. Senior Pentagon officials, this is a quote, senior Pentagon officials are sounding the alarm on the threat climate change poses to military bases in the U.S. and above and abroad over the next few decades. Whoops. And I just lost it. Let me see if I can find it again. Well, anyway, here's a summary of it. Senior Pentagon officials are sounding the alarm on the threat climate change poses to military bases in the U.S. and abroad over the next few decades, and a new report offers an overview of the risks. Quote, we face all kinds of threats in our line of work, but few of them truly deserve to be called existential, end quote, said Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on Thursday in remarks delivered at the Leaders Summit on climate. And then he ends with another quote. The climate crisis does. The Defense Department also released an expanded climate change report Thursday, providing an overview of the threat that climate change poses to nearly 1,400 DoD installations around the world. Now that's interesting because the figure in the mainstream press is 800 U.S. bases around the world. Here we have, right from the fucking horse's mouth, 1,400. Do you know how many bases the rest of the world combined has on foreign soil? Every other country in the world added together, 79. The U.S. has 1,400. The rest of the world has 79. Oh my God. If that doesn't tell you something about the militaristic stance of the U.S., the kind of Roman imperium they're trying to impose upon the world as they go down the toilet. And I hear they're going down the toilet the opposite direction in Australia. So this goes on. The report utilized the Defense Climate Assessment Tool. They used the Defense Climate Assessment Tool, Breitbart nitwits, a statistical model developed by the Army Corps of Engineers to screen the installations for potential climate threats under competing temperature rise scenarios, higher and lower in 2050 and 2085. The predominant threats identified for installations are hazards more directly tied to temperature change, such as excessive heat, drought, and wildfires. Now it's interesting. They included colder temperatures, but farther down in the summaries, they're quoting excessive heat, drought, and wildfires. And I don't know if you know anything about physics over there at Breitbart, you fucking idiots, but I understand excessive heat, drought, and wildfires is higher temperatures. So shut the fuck up about it. And you can see, I got pissed off at having to hear this drivel from the American morons at Breitbart. And anybody that reads Breitbart or thinks you're getting any news from it, just take a hot poker and shove it up your ass, because that'll be more informative. Other related climate threats will increase over time, though to a lesser extent, according to the report. The risks assessed include coastal and river flooding. This is what's happened to a number of coastal U.S. bases. The airstrips flood, and when the airstrips are under 2 feet of water, the planes can't take off. So your guard is down, dummies. Importantly, there is, quote, no scenario under which installation exposure to climate hazards is projected to decrease, said the authors in the report's key takeaways section. While the worst is yet to come, according to climate scientists and the authors of the report, Austin said Thursday that extreme weather caused by climate change, that's a quote, is already posing a major threat to military bases and readiness. you like to add anything at this point, Dustin?
I'm just curious what solutions they're proposing, or what when I say solutions, obviously that's a pretty strong word for any propositions to combat some of these problems that they're referencing there. I mean, what do they propose they're going to do to anything? I mean, like, is there anything that they've said that has any basis that they can? Obviously, they're saying they have strategic reasons to be involved in the battle against climate change, but what are they doing exactly to combat some of the problems they're discussing there?
Very little. They do have some bases that now have solar, that get some of their electricity from solar power.
Mm-hmm.
The other plans are to build when they build new bases, to do it to do it with climate change in mind. That is, don't build them close to an ocean, too close to an ocean. These are their solutions. Their solution, as far as the Arctic melting, is to build more military bases, to post more troops to thwart the Chinese and the Russians, especially. No, there are no solutions. No, I mean, let's see if there's. I don't think there's anything about solutions in this whole report. Let's see. I mean, it's so general, and I guess we could go into the details of it and call up the whole report. Let's see. It says the report recommends that DoD develop a, quote, multiple lines of defense approach to countering climate risks that, quote, that can include a mix of management, temporary, structural, nature-based, and non-structural measures, whatever that means. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, that one of their solutions is to try to be the one that controls the energy resources like oil and those types of things around the world.
Right.
That's why they have these wars, to control for themselves. So they have that for themselves.
Yeah, right. To control, actually, to just exercise control over oil as a resource to basically fuel the fleet and accelerate climate change. So, in other words, it's kind of the typical military solution to things. The military is they're not the brightest people on the planet by a long stretch. I mean, right from the foot soldier to the head, the generals and the Joint Chiefs, they're not that smart, and they can't see the fact. There's one figure. I got so much stuff here, but there was one figure that I believe it was the U.S. military uses as much fossil fuel as 140 other countries combined, or was it created that much as much carbon emissions? This is just the military. This isn't the U.S. civilian part of the U.S. This is just it was like 140 times. It was astonishing, the figure that was there, that you could call from these reports. But then the report goes on. The DoD plans to utilize the report and the DCAT to complete climate exposure assessments on all major U.S. installations within 12 months, and all major OCONUS installations, which I'm not sure what that is, within 24 months, according to the Thursday press release. Now it's several weeks old. From that statement, it sounds like they're just going to try to figure out ways to ameliorate the situation, to kick it down the road. That sounds like what their solution is. Mm-hmm. I mean, they really don't have a solution. First of all, they're a wholly owned subsidiary of major U.S. corporations, and among those major U.S. corporations, you have oil companies, and they're not going to sit by and allow the U.S. military to go green. That's never going to happen. And uh, no, that's an interesting question. I'm looking at all this stuff I've got sitting here, and there doesn't seem to be any any solution to that at all. I mean, or any suggestion of a way of solving it at all. So it's
Yeah, there are different energy sources. They're talking about wind power, solar power. Some people are saying, diet changes. They want to, not restrict, but some suggestions have been, for families to shrink down. Have only one kid if they're going to have kids. I've heard a lot of different proposals, but I'm not sure any of them. But as far as on the individual level, what families can do to restrict, but I can never connect any of it to what that has to do with actually, combating climate change. I mean, of course, changing energy sources that are more renewable and, nature friendly would be a good step. But, some of the other things I've read, it just doesn't seem like they're very conducive to solutions. I don't think anybody really has a, straightforward, plan that can be implemented. I mean, I know over the years, there've been like the Kyoto resolutions. There've been, we have the Paris Accords and so forth that have been brought to the table. But then you have, national conflicts that come into play that make the hard to implement a lot of these things. I remember, when Clinton was discussing the Kyoto resolutions, he said, if China's willing to help implement this, we're going forward with it as the United States. And then China said, no, we're not going to do it. And so Clinton pulled out and said, we're not going to do it then, because there's competition between countries on these things, and and industries, and all have to keep we have to keep feeding our people. I mean, we can't just back out and let the we have the strategic interest there. I mean, I think there's a lot of conflicts, geopolitical conflicts that come into this as well, that make it very difficult for the world itself to just agree on something that we can all do, to propose something that will be worthy of, an actual, proposed set of solutions. I mean, that won't harm the economy in the sense that, now we've got, we'll have to shut everything down or something. I mean, I think the coronavirus to a degree has been probably the closest thing to any kind of solution we've had and ever. And, I mean, because, I know they said that, carbon emissions have been reduced quite a bit since, the coronavirus for these last 2 years. They're still saying it's not really enough to make any dents, but it's been something, they've talked about that. I've read some articles on that. I can't, every time someone brings up climate change, what can we do? Is there anything, that we can all agree that the world can implement to make things, to further the fight against this thing? Because it's obviously a very major threat to, not just to any particular country, but to all of us in general. It's a human issue.
Well,
the poor
to address,
and the most
to address,
going to be hit really hard by this.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, people that are, already suffering a lot from just in general because of whatever issue that, in countries that are disadvantaged, and, they're already suffering, and they're going to be hit harder by a lot of this stuff than the rest of us.
Yeah, well, I mean, to go back to what you said about the Kyoto Accords, actually, the Clinton administration had set them up to not so much to ameliorate the climate situation. I mean, China was well aware that it had a problem, and it's done more to address that problem in the last 10 years, 15 years than by far than the U.S. has. But it was just the Clinton plan was basically to slow down the Chinese economy, if not bring it to a halt altogether. So I could see why they would have turned down the proposal at that time. As there were several other things you said that I think are worth addressing, but let me just read one paragraph here on what the military is doing to prepare for the climate problem. if there's one thing we do exceptionally well here at DoD, and this is Austin again, the leader of DoD. We think about the future of different contingencies we could get called into. So this is the way the military thinks about the future. I want you Breitbart people out there, if there are any of you, listen closely. We're going to be thinking about how we train and equip our force in a climate change environment. In other words, the climate change is going to happen, baby. Temperatures are going to rise, but we're going to make sure, he says, we have our installation infrastructure built in a resilient way. So if it's 140 degrees, they're going to be ready for it. If it's 160 degrees and every troop is out there toasty, they'll have robots out there, I'm sure. A resilient way. We're going to make sure we have resilient supply chains. How's that working out? That we're being innovative. Well, that we're tapping into areas like green technology. Well, here we go. Here in the United States, he says. And that we're collaborating with the private sector, with partners overseas and other government agencies in our research and development and ways ahead. In other words, he's not saying shit. He doesn't know what to do. His people don't know what to do. Nobody knows what to do. All they know to do is to carry on with their 1,400 military bases around the world, a number that just dwarfs the rest of the world combined. Imagine if they cut it down to like 160, twice the number of military bases that all the other countries in the world have combined on foreign soil. 160. They would eliminate so much climate change that we would be heady just from it being going. I know people would still have to use energy, and a lot of these military people would be out of jobs, and this whole cycle of producing uneducated idiots that are forced into the military so that they can, pay for 5% of their education when they get out, if they can, is absurd. That they can maintain that cycle so they can maintain enough enlisted people. They learned their lesson with my generation. Don't educate us, because if you teach us how to read, we're going to understand your game, buddy. We're going to figure your ass out. So don't do that. It reminds me of this. There's this James McMurtry, this singer, and he has a song called "We Have an Operation Going On," and it's about operations now in all of these countries. That I could take a microphone and go onto the fucking sidewalk and say, do you know any of the countries where the United States is now destabilizing that country, or there's a low intensity warfare going on initiated by the Central Intelligence Agency? Just name one. Name one. Nobody. Virtually no one can do it because no one gives a rat's ass. And the interesting part about the song is it's very insightful, not from you or I, because we know this, but the deal is that what you do is you use outsourced people. He talks about this reminds me of something you said. He talks about a KBR guy, a Kellogg Brown and Root guy, who's there outsourced. This isn't in the song, but he costs $1,600 a day. Whereas a Marine out there is $249 a day. So, and the outsourced guy, first of all, that's where your fucking taxpayers' money going. He talks about the KBI guy sitting down to dinner, and it's a steak. Where the Marine, he's eating an MRE. He's eating an envelope of food that is not as palatable, let's say, as a KBR steak. So the KBR guy sits down with the steak. He's making personally $600 or $800 a day. KBR is getting another $700 or $800 a day for putting him in the field and the taxpayers are paying for that shit. And these guys don't care. They're not doing anything. They're not even doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're just eating a steak. What's the most expensive meat you can buy now for that the common man used to be able to afford? Beef. And why is it so expensive? Because it's so water intensive. So what's under the Sahel? Water. So why is the U.S. interested in the Sahel? For the water, to feed more beef, to give to more fat shithead KBR people. And so the cycle continues. I wish I could be more hopeful about it, but it just, for me, it just gets more and more deadly, because when you think about it, and this is the way I thought about it, what is the major property that fuels climate change, and what that fuels the kind of secular extinction, the kind of secular end times that we're now faced with? Because it's not biblical, because the religions were too stupid that he had it right in front of them. The fucking Catholic Church had it right in front of them with Galileo and Bruno. They could have fucking said, "Oh, the problem is what you're doing is you're using mathematics. You're using a system to substitute symbols for what's right in front of your face." But of course, the Catholic Church had been doing that for so long. They were delusional. They were so far delusional about it. They had their heads so far up their asses, they couldn't even figure it out. They couldn't even put two and two together. So with the advent of the calculus, with Leibniz and Newton, you end up with this acceleration of the use of mathematics, of quantification, what P.J. Sorokin called quantophrenia, and which he attributed only to the social sciences, but a number of us have now written about them attributing it to the hard sciences. There's a quantophrenic majority, an overload that bears no relationship to reality. So even at that kind of existential epistemological level, that is how we can know the world, which is essentially through mathematics. That's how we can know the cell phone. That's how we can know the computer that we're on right now. That makes it even more nihilistic than the bonehead military not being able to come up with a solution. But you can see why they might be in this predicament where they can't come up with a solution. It's not just that they're beholden to major corporations, which they are. It's not just that they the plan with from the Monroe Doctrine to NSA 68 to the Project for the New American Century, and all of these nitwit run the world plans that the United States has come up with over the centuries, not only the decades but the centuries, that they're implausible and unsustainable, and just basically show a level of greed and ignorance that's basically going to cost them their majority. But then you go, so what? Because China becomes the number one country, so what? It's going to become the number one country over a world that's unsustainable, that no one can live in. So I'm not the one to ask, because I have spent years checking into the quantification of culture and the damage it does, and all of these. It's not that it hasn't produced this a much more livable, a much more pleasurable world for a few of us. But it's short-sighted. It's if anything, climate change has shown us is that the whole project, from Leibniz to Newton, was short-sighted. I mean, even Newton predicted the end of the world at 2060, and he might be pretty close to the money, So, but he didn't do it. He didn't do it using quantification in the traditional sense. He did it by using numerology in the religious sense, from Christian numerology, biblical numerology, Old Testament numerology, the Kabbalah. But he did come up with this figure that when you first see it, you kind of get stunned, because we're standing at the brink of extinction, and 2060 doesn't sound implausible, which is rather remarkable. But as far as the U.S. military and those boneheads being able to do anything about it, that ship has passed, and you can't even get. I mean, you could go all day long and say, "Look, the U.S. military supports climate change," and you could put that in Breitbart, and people will call you an idiot, or say, "No, you're wrong," or worse, they'll call you an asswipe, or a communist, or woo communist, or a dickwad, or whatever they want to call you. But just so no, they're not proposing any solutions. They don't have any. I don't have any.
I was thinking when you mentioned steak and talking about the meat source and whatever. I just read yesterday that the Federal Reserve in St. Louis, I think it was the chairman, has suggested for Thanksgiving that we switch to tofu instead of turkey, because it was more nutritious and more cost effective in this inflationary economy. And I thought that was kind of for me, it was ridiculous to start with, to say, okay, we'll have switch your and especially right before Thanksgiving to make the suggestion, which was weird to me. And they do these things like, talk about, dietary changes. And I know there's a lot of talk about, reducing, eating meat, as a solution to climate change. People should eat less meat, and especially beef. But they're also, I've heard another thing. I think it was the World Economic Forum had a video that they were talking about the ability to literally use sort of like I don't know what it is, like a genetic science to create a beef that is, it's actual beef, but it's not directly from cows. I don't know if you heard anything about that. They're able to create foods like this without going through all the the trouble of raising the cows and the cattle out in the field with as you said, with the water, all the waste that goes into that. And they're coming up with new ideas to new technologies to create the same foods for much more in a much more efficient way, that we won't have to be so wasteful in using them.
Well, I mean, how did the beef situation come about? Well, it's complicated, but in a certain sense, it's not too complicated. The modes of transportation were improved.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we got from that was the internal combustion engine,
right,
which was once the savior of the world. But of course, it was like on the apical tip for a long time for the end of the world. Mm-hmm. It was a world-ending technology. It went from producing this kind of middle-class life that much of us live in this country and that other people experience around the world, to being one of the most dangerous technologies ever invented.
Right.
That's what I mean by short-sighted.
Right.
I mean, to a certain extent, well, I guess it really wasn't predictable.
Right.
That people got tired of stepping in horse manure when they crossed the street.
Mm-hmm.
I can't blame them. That wasn't that much fun. So the same thing, I suspect, since the science involved is dependent upon kind of a Han Dynasty standardization of measurement, the mark of Cain. It's interesting because in the gospel, Cain is the one who measures everything, and he is the one who is obviously has to slave in this environment that's not really conducive to anything other than toil. So the thing is that these technologies will have will have their own negatives, and You take solar panels, for example. They use so many toxins to make solar panels. They have to be replaced so that you have all of these non-biodegradable elements once again being out there. Now you look at it now, and it doesn't seem like a problem because there isn't that much solar out there.
Right.
But if you go solar and wind, you're going to have so many tall windmills that the shafts and the propellers have to be replaced. Calls for constant maintenance, and so many solar panels out there that once again you're going to bury the planet and use solar panels. They're not much of the elements are not biodegradable, and many of the materials are highly toxic.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like uranium. They wanted the WHIP program out west. They wanted to bury it out there. People said, no way. Are you going to bury this stuff anywhere near where we live? Because it's going to destroy our groundwater, which of course it would. And so that's the way that's Leibniz and Newton's. That's part of their inheritance to us. That's part of what they gave us. This limited set of technologies through mathematics, through quantification, that have led to these kind of banal technologies, if you really get down to it, that have made our lives more tolerable. It's like I have a friend of mine who lives in a little tiny one-bedroom apartment, has virtually nothing, and he points out that he lives better than a feudal king lived in one of those drafty, tubercular castles back in the day, in 600 AD. And it's true. He has an air conditioner when it gets hot. It's a window unit. There's enough heat on this old building to keep him warm during the winter. And, his few $100s a month disability gets him soup in a can, and it's always there for him. It's like, so it's like, it was that short-sighted. I don't know. I don't think personally that there's a solution. Now that's just me.
Right.
Now,
I agree. I totally agree.
The reason I get so angry about the people like the Breitbart assholes is that they don't want to even acknowledge the truth.
The problem, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They and when I say they're unpatriotic, I'm being facetious,
right? Because
I'm the last person that you could call patriotic. But by the same token, they are the way they are because they haven't taken an ounce of effort, not an ounce of effort. And that's another dimension to the hopelessness of this situation. Mm-hmm. And if there was if human beings were able to make this sea change, if they were able to shift like schools of fish or birds in flight and maneuver around because of what was around them, because of the environment they lived in, mm-hmm. that would be great. But the problem is they're so inured with this Leibniz-Newton situation where it's not what's around them. The Western philosophy has given us many examples. The phenomenologists, Kant, Hegel, they've all talked about this problem of quantification in detail. And if there was a possibility that human nature could as one realize the problem and address it some way, perhaps, yeah. But frankly, Western imperial epistemology has destroyed the alternatives. I mean, mm-hmm. not that any of them were majority alternatives, and the world is certainly, that's another problem. The population of the world, because of these advancements in technology, has grown to such a level that now none of these minority visions that I actually know very little about, None of these minority visions could win the day. They wouldn't have a chance. Just the indigenous people in Brazil or Colombia, just people trying to live off the land there. The major corporations, they hire thugs to go in and kill them. Somebody that doesn't want the trees cut down in the area that they've lived in for centuries, if they step up and become an environmentalist, they're dead. The corporations will have them killed. U.S. corporations have more hired killers on contract than the mafia could ever dream of in their largest wet dream. The U.S. corporations have militaries in their pocket to go out and kill anybody that steps forward. So there's that dimension that doesn't bode well for the planet. Let's cut down all the trees, burn it all down, slash and burn, whatever it takes to raise more cattle, as they do in Brazil. So and Argentina, but Argentina has less forested. So, but there's no solution there.
Well, I think this has been a really interesting discussion. We went from, in various directions as to what the problem it really is, and the fact that it is indeed a problem that we're facing in an existential crisis that's going on. I'm hoping that you mentioned then in one part of your discussion about how we have these solutions or proposed solutions, and they end up creating their own set of problems. And so it seems like that's sort of the history of humankind, really, is that we always face a dilemma of some kind. We propose some idea to fix it, and then down the road it comes to a head, and it is more problems than it was worth, kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's my opinion. I agree with you. I don't think there's a solution. And if there was, then there's no way we're going to find it in time to do anything. It seems like I'm hoping that things level themselves out gradually. I don't want to live in a world where I have to face 160-degree temperatures. That's definitely not what I would like to live in that environment. But definitely. So we have concluded the program here. We've reached an hour-long discussion of the climate change dilemma and what the military has to say and why what their interests are, and how they're proposing to their own solutions, quote unquote, to climate change, which don't seem too promising in the general picture. It seems more like it's strategic rather than an actual solution to the general problem. And as we discussed, we don't have the solutions either. But the good news is today is Thanksgiving in the United States. And so, guys, just happy Thanksgiving. Have a great holiday season. Try to relax a little bit. We don't have any idea what to do about some of these problems we're facing. We're here to discuss and share information. So you guys out there sitting down for a dinner today, just have a good time. Talk to your family, have an excellent holiday season, and keep on the lookout for the Parrot Literary Corner returning soon and our Series 2 volume. And we'll get that out December 1st. Thank you for watching the program, the Foreign Policy Review. Hope you have an excellent day. Happy Thanksgiving again.